prostitutes and say that in an area the size of London, out of 80,000, they were all from roughly one pretty small area, and in fact, they could have had more connections than being common victims.
Absolutely. Once again, this is a point which has never been brought out before. Nobody has researched the case deeply enough to have discovered this central point. Out of all the prostitutes in London, 80,000, Jack the Ripper killed 5. And all these people representing the killings as random maniac killings just do not consider that these women all knew each other. 2 of them lived in the same house. Three of them lived in the same street, and all of them rubbed shoulders daily in the same pub.
Amazing.
Which is 20 yards from where Mary Kelly was killed.
Now, if we get back to what that nun said, if it had not been for Marie Kelly, none of these murders would have happened. Let us now look at why this lady becomes so important. Was she a witness to something? Did she know too much?
To answer that, I have to take you from the East End back several years to the West End of London.
Right.
And back to Walter Sickert,
the painter,
the father of Joseph Sickert, my informant, and the original source of the story which I was investigating, and which at every step I took became truer.
And there's an illustration of the finding of Beddoes' body and various other drawings related to the murders that appeared in the contemporary press. That's the scene in Mitre Square in the middle. And again, the Hughes brothers have obviously gone to great trouble to get this right. In the movie, you'll see they recreate Mitre Square and the murder of Beddoes. And that's the Illustrated Police News as it looked at the time, rather a sensational sort of publication. It wasn't an official police publication, but it was called the Illustrated Police News and Law Courts Weekly Record. And here's an idea of what the contemporary idea of what the murderer may have looked like in the middle there. That's based on various witness descriptions.
So there were witnesses then? There were witness reports?
Well, there were witness reports, but whether or not they actually saw the Ripper and his victim or not is a matter of some dispute. So they do vary in value and validity. So we don't really know if anyone actually saw Jack the Ripper, but they certainly drew what the suspect looked like from the descriptions of the witnesses at the scene. And these are 2 shots of Catherine Eddowes in the mortuary. You can see the strange mutilations to her face. She's got 2 inverted V's on her cheeks and a slash across her face there. And in this picture, you can see they've stitched up the mutilation to her face in the mortuary.
And were the Hughes brothers concerned with the detail of the murders and getting that right in the film?
Yes, the Hughes brothers went to great lengths to get the injuries correct, and some very expensive prosthetic bodies were built for the movie, and they are very, very accurate and very impressive. In fact, people who saw them apparently felt quite sick. They were so realistic. So I think the movie is going to be very interesting from that point of view. It's a shot here of Eddowes in the mortuary, a drawing that was done at the time showing how extensive the wounds that the Ripper inflicted were. And she had her uterus and left kidney taken away.
Do you think the involvement of the press actually made it quite difficult for the police to carry out their investigation?
I think the police hindered rather than helped. Certainly in some aspects, publicity can help a police investigation. I think in 1888 it hindered the police because it brought about a lot of public interest, a lot of rowdyism on the streets, people chasing innocent people, shouting out Jack the Ripper, and also led to a lot of false leads that the police had to pursue before they could eliminate from their inquiries. So I think huge publicity created a lot of work for the police. These are both shots of Beddoes again, and that's exactly as she was found in Mitre Square. Yeah, they've propped the body up against the wall of the mortuary here to take a photograph. She's pegged up against the wall just so that the police could take, or the police photographer could take a shot of her. And that's the map they prepared to go with the inquest into the murder. And again, we have the map of Mitre Square with the body in the southern corner of the square, and a drawing of it as it was found. You can still see Mitre Square today, and in fact, we took the Hughes brothers around the East End and showed them all the murder sites as they look today. So it was interesting to relate these contemporary scenes with what they look like today.
In recent years, there's been a whole range of theories linked around the British royal family.
Stephen, Prince Albert Victor Christian Edward, future King of England, and the great artist Walter Sickert, the Prince now with his newfound alias, able to enjoy the part-time life of a commoner. So what were they getting up to? Was it out dropping a few pints of ale, or were they a wenching, or what were the typical activities that Sickert and Eddie were getting into?
Well, both of those things. And Eddie took a few brief painting lessons from Sickert and met all Sickert's friends, who were a motley bunch, and was generally enjoying himself. Sickert knew a girl who worked in the shop opposite, Annie Elizabeth Crook, as I said. And Sickert was very fond of this girl, and he introduced the pair, Eddie and Annie. Eddie was struck by a certain similarity of this girl to his mother, and he got on very well with her. And eventually, he fell in love with her, she with him. And they were secretly married. He couldn't officially marry her.
Uh-huh.
She was a Catholic for a start.
Oh, yeah.
He was under 25, so he would have had to get permission to marry her. He married her under a false name, but he married her nevertheless at a St. Saviour's private chapel near Cleveland Street. Then, in 1885, Annie bore Eddie a child, a daughter, who was born at Marylebone Workhouse and who was christened Alice Margaret Crook. She underwent 2 baptisms, an Anglican baptism for Eddie and a Catholic baptism for Annie. But inevitably, it reached the ears of the Prime Minister, Lord Salisbury. The throne was very unpopular at that time. There was constant fear of revolution, and Salisbury himself was especially frightened of anarchists, socialists. There was a rising tide of socialism, and the government was very unpopular, the throne was very unpopular. He believed that it would take very little anyway to end the monarchy with Victoria's death. With Prince Eddie's behaviour, he believed that if that became public, it would be almost a certainty that the monarchy would end, and end immediately, that there would be revolution, total revolution in England. So that information about Eddie marrying a Catholic, because anti-Catholic feeling then was incredibly intense. If he had to keep that silence at all costs. So he staged a police raid in Cleveland Street while Eddie and Annie were together. Eddie was taken back to court and severely reprimanded, and Annie was taken away and confined in a hospital. And she spent the rest of her life in hospitals, workhouses, and prisons after some sort of primitive brain operation had been performed on her.
Some perverted lobotomy with
something like that, to erase all memory of her past and her alliance with the prince. During that raid, the child escaped with her nanny, and that nanny, who had been taken on by Sickert, was Mary Kelly. Mary Kelly escaped from Cleveland Street, taking the child with her, and she escaped to the East End. Eventually,